All right. My name's Adam Chappell. I'm supposed to talk to you today about row rice and cover crops and kind of a new approach to row rice as far as planting and seeding rates, things of that nature. So we'll just jump right on in it. If you don't know me, I farm with my brother in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, fourth generation farmers there. We kind of started with cover crops and stuff in 2010, and we've been able to maintain competitive yields for our area through that journey with some pretty steep learning curves. But the biggest difference now to prior to 2010 is our input budget's about half or 60% of what it once was. So with the low commodity prices and things we've been having, weather and all that, that's been huge for us, over the last several years. I got a couple degrees. I went to Arkansas State and got a degree in botany. Kind of avoided ag. I thought when I left the farm I was going to go into a science field or something, but I just couldn't get away from the farm. Anyway, I went on to University of Arkansas, got a master's in entomology. So I don't know if it's the schooling or what, but I look at things pretty critically and analytically, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it causes me more trouble than it helps. But anyway, it's how I'm wired. So what I want to talk about is SRI. It's called the System of Rice Intensification. Now, this is a system that's been around for a while in other parts of the world where they don't have a safety net, no government subsidies, no subsidized crop insurance. I mean, these are impoverished countries that depend on their small rice paddy to feed their family and have enough to sell. So, they're doing it because it works. It was a system developed by a Jesuit priest in the 80s in Madagascar. He was down there, it's a rice growing country there. He was trying to help them improve their systems of rice, and he noticed that some of the thinner rice stands would always make as much or more than their traditional way of doing things. So he just kind of improved on that system with some consistency and a little more precision, and developed SRI. And then, in the 90s, a guy from Cornell, Dr. Norman Uphoff, he went in there and took it a whole nother step forward and moved it around the world to, other places like the Philippines, Thailand, India, a lot of places like that. But these are third world countries doing this, and they're doing it with varieties that we consider to be outdated or, even ancient. They're using alternate wetting and drying for their irrigation, no consistent flood. That reduces their water use, which most of it is caught by rain, or rain that's caught and held. So that's a tremendous thing for them. 90% reduction in seed because of the way they plant. Their fertilities are limited to compost. I mean, these are simple folks. They don't have access to the same kind of fertility and things that we do. All their labor is done by hand. But the kicker here is they're achieving yields in these countries better than we are here in the U.S., at least better than I am. 250 to 275 bushels an acre is not uncommon in this SRI method. That's way better than I make. I'd love to make rice like that, but anyway, so why hadn't we heard about this system in the U.S.? What's holding that system back? Well, so how does SRI work? I'm boiling this down because we've only got a short amount of time here, but traditional seeding rates are one seed every square foot, not a seed. These people plant transplants, so they're planting 2 to 3 day old seedlings in a one by one pattern, and that's their optimum planting rate. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, that one plant per square foot ought to sound familiar to you if you grow hybrid rice. That's how they determine whether or not you need to replant or not. That equates to about 2 pounds of seed per acre. I find it, odd, I guess, that 2 pounds to the acre is an acceptable stand, but we're planting 22 to 25. that's kind of how all this started for me. And anyway, you know, in this SRI system, they've gone as wide as, you know, 48 by 48, one every 2 feet. I mean, sorry, 24 by 24. But somewhere between 1 and 1.5 feet squared is good. 1 feet squared is ideal. And like I said, they use all alternate wetting and drying irrigation. And another thing they do is they float their seeds to separate the less dense from the dense seeds. The ones that float are less dense or lower quality. They discard those right away and get them out of their system. So I think that's pretty unique. So can we adapt this to large scale farming here in the US? I mean, why can't we? With everything we have here, why can we not do this? You know, we've got advanced planter technology. We've got superior varieties, in my opinion, that have huge tillering capacity. You know, our weeds, insect, disease management programs have got to be light years ahead of these people because they're hand weeding. And, you know, I mean, we've got ways to precisely manage our irrigation water. I mean, we've got so many more technological advances. We ought to be able to take this system to a whole nother level. I think you don't hear about it a lot because, you know, 2 pounds to the acre doesn't sell a whole lot of seed. And there's also other reductions in this system as far as fertility and water use, and we'll get into that later. Now, as far as the cover crop piece goes, our planting starts in the fall. We get cover crops planted right behind the combine. And in this system, the way we're doing it, they're critical for us for weed control because you're going to have a lot of open canopy for a good long while planting at these lower rates and these spacings that I'm talking about. The other thing it does for us is it really increases the interval between irrigations. It allows us to, you know, really have some time between each irrigation event. But we want to go into early spring looking like this. We want a good stand to cover crop, feeding that soil biology. You notice here how much corn residue's left. It's not near what it was when we planted that cover crop the previous fall. That soil biology is very active and it is chewing through that residue. And that's just cycling nutrients and things back into the soil, feeding, you know, all the microbiota, all the earthworms, just everything good in the soil. You know, you got to keep feeding that thing to keep it going. So if we're looking like this early spring, we're setting perfect. Now, for irrigating, you know, we gotta prepare for that. We've got to have clean middles to get water to the end and get this rice watered up. So we just use a you know, furrow cleaner thing. It's something we built. You can build them, you can buy them, people sell them. But it does a really good job cleaning the furrow out to get you ready for irrigation. And we do this prior to planting normally. But sometimes we do it in the fall, like right after our cover crop drill, like we're doing here in this video. Now you see there, it's just making a good trench. Now this is for some wide row cotton and stuff like that. I didn't have any for my rice beds, but you can see what kind of trench we're making. And then we're planting right down the top of those beds. So now planting, this is the planter we use. We use it because that's what we've got. It's a twin row 38. It's got a VSEP precision meters with plates made for rice because we really wanted to focus on the singulation of the rice seed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, I settled on 6 pounds per acre as my seeding rate, and that was not just a shot in the dark. That was after a lot of careful deliberation and calls and research. And depending on when you get planted, I think potentially that's too thick. I think going down to 4 pounds with an early planting window is going to be just fine. You know, our rice went in late this year, later than I was comfortable with, later than I've ever planted it before. And our yields weren't what we wanted them to be. You know, it is what it is, but September needed to cooperate for us and it didn't. It was cloudy, it was cool. We had a hard time finishing our rice crop because we were dependent on late tillers secondary, tertiary, on out tillers, and we did not get to finish those. So early planting with this configuration of mine is going to be key. And if we get later in the year, we're going to have to regroup on our spacing, not necessarily our rate, but spacing is going to be the key there. But this is just a planter going through the field. We planted into that cover crop. You can see it's clean, no weeds. We just rolled it right in there. So singulation of the seed. Now this is possible with these meters and these plates, but it is every bit as important in planting from seed as it is in that SRI system in the third world country with a single transplant. It's so critical to this system to singulate this rice seed and have one plant in each space. And this next slide shows you why. This is the difference in plant architecture. This is my scout's daughter, Charlotte, Craig Shelton's daughter. I don't know that she doesn't work harder than he does, but anyway, this is how much plant architecture changes when you take seed and singulate it. So we have a singulated seed on our 6 pounds per acre on the right, and on the left is a single plant pulled from a rice field that was planted way thicker than that. And you can see the difference in plant architecture. I mean, I think that plant had like, I don't know, 40 or 50 tillers on it of ours. And I mean, you can just look at it and tell there's a huge difference there. And it's not that much different in age. That's the thing about it. It's not much farther behind. It's definitely not going to catch those plants in tillering, but the changes above ground or below ground are just as drastic as the ones above. The rooting system on these rice plants are huge. And it's for the same reason. They have lots of space, lots of room to grow. And all of that equals a lower cost per unit of outcome. So, a single seed by itself has exponentially more tillering capacity than any single seed grouped in a clump. So at the end of the year, the clump may have as many heads as the single seed, but you've got a lot more cost in the clump because of seed than you do in the single seed for the same outcome. So in the underground, the bigger the root structure, the better you can manage your irrigation and fertility. You don't need as much fertility if you got bigger roots. You don't have to irrigate as much if you got bigger roots. It's just how that works. So emergence, after we planted, we got to pause for a minute. Okay, we're back. So yeah, while we were waiting on this rice to emerge, we looked at a lot of brown grass for a long time. We'd have to go out there to see if those plants were coming up. It was hard to look at from the pickup. You just were doubting it all the time, but it didn't take long. Even with the rice being as late as it was, it did not take long for the green streaks to start showing up. I mean, and that stuff was rolling. It came through there quick. It started looking good. And then we laid the pipe and put the water to it. And, between, herbicide shots and fertility shots and running the water, the stuff grew crazy fast. So, looking at that brown grass for a while didn't end up hurting anything. It just was different. You're used to seeing rice come out of a clean seed bed and green up just after a few days. It's a little bit different to look at that. So, we were able to keep this stuff clean. I mean, the cover crops helped immensely. It ended up canopying, closing the canopy, from a 30-inch middle, basically. We had an 8-inch top, 30-inch middle, and it lapped that up. And our weed control program was not much different than it would have been regularly. Our pre-emerge was Roundup, followed by Gramoxone and Command about 48 hours later, or right behind the planter. Early post, we came in with Command and Prowl. Late post, Rice Bow and Facet. And then as we needed in fields, we had, some nut sedge or grass escapes, things we needed to whoop on a little bit. So we used some Permit, some Rebel X where we needed it. But overall, we were able to keep this rice really clean and looking good all year long. Pretty cheap weed control program for what I was expecting. Fertility, pre-plant, we had 200 pounds of AMS out. We came back between our first and second irrigation with a dose of 32% out of some drop tubes. And then we thought we were done and probably could have been done, but we were late planted already. We were trying to push it. So we flew on another 100 pounds of AMS at boot. We just didn't want to leave anything on the table as late as it was. And I don't know that shot helped us at all, but we were just kind of hedging our bets. So we just did it. But this stuff started heading out and flowering. I mean, you can see it's canopied, it's clean. That spacing that I'm using is not too wide at all. That twin row 38, nothing wrong with that spacing. So, use what you got. That's what I did. I couldn't afford to buy a new planter that would let me space it 1 by 1 feet. And I was going to furrow irrigate anyway. So I just figured on the bed is good enough. Maturity, I mean, this thing made some huge rice heads. I mean, this system just really made some exceptionally long, heavy rice heads. The problem was a lot of the later tillers just didn't have time to finish out. September just was not kind to us. But we've got hope for the future. With timely planting, I think, we can leave our 5-year average behind with this with tremendously less cost. It's, not even really going to be close in the end if we just figure out the timing on planting and then how we need to adjust spacing and things at the end of it. As I said before, our yields were not where we wanted them to be because of the late planting, but this field was one of our better ones. It cut about 150 bushel per acre. The best part about 150 bushel per acre rice in this system is we had a break even of about 85 bushels. The inputs were very low, and that was mainly in a reduction of seeding cost. So we feel like there's a lot of potential moving forward with this system. I know this is a really brief overview of it, but we're going to try this again next year. We're going to mess with seeding rates a little bit and different widths. We're going to try to do our twin row just a little bit wider on top, do a 12-inch top and a 26-inch middle, just to try to close that gap a little bit faster, maybe give those plants a little more space on top of the bed to do more tillering. But other than that, we really like the system. It allows us to no-till our beans directly into this the following year. We've used rice in our non-GMO bean program, and it's a great rotation for weed control. So right behind this combine, we were drilling cover crops as soon as it was dry enough. So we'll be planting soybeans on those beds next year, non-GMO, and they usually do really good behind that rice stubble. So that's about what I got to say on my version of SRI rice, row rice. It's a little bit different than your traditional row rice, just drilling on the beds the full rate. But I think there's a lot of potential there for profit. And I don't think we're going to give up anything with yield with timely plantings and once we get our feet under this system a little better. So with that, I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me speak. And I hope you got some ideas to try at your place.
I'm Keith Scoggins, the state cropland agronomist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service here in Arkansas. And I'm going to talk a little bit today on a new spin on double crop soybeans. So traditionally, this is kind of what you see in the fall, soybeans soybean stubble that's been tilled and wheat drilled into it, and with $6 wheat, $6 plus wheat now. I know there's been quite a bit of wheat planted in Arkansas. I'm sure there's been across other areas of the Delta as well. But that wheat always poses a problem, and the reason that we've got to have wheat prices of $6 or more to get anybody interested in growing wheat is that it's got to be able to make up for the offset in yield. And that offset in yield comes from, not having sufficient moisture at planting. And then also you've got to wait to get that wheat harvested and get it out of the way. And this is our typical soybean, 15-inch row soybeans planted into standing wheat straw. This was actually my first venture into no-till. Started several years ago. When we first started, quote unquote, no-tilling, we would burn the straw to get rid of all the residue and pull the moisture up to the surface of the ground and plant soybeans. And then along the way, we figured out that it's better off just to leave that straw, because then you don't have to wait on the right wind to burn. You don't have to get all the conditions just right to burn. So we planted into the straw, and we started with trash wheels, and the ground's dry and it's hard, and it always poses some problems planting into wheat straw. So we through the years have started growing cover crops and grow cover crops on the majority of my farm. And what that allows us to do is conserve moisture, control weeds, all the other benefits that cover crops give. And the idea for this is research that myself and Dr. Green, Dr. Steve Green from Arkansas State University is actually, we're actually doing this on my farm, but it was actually Adam's idea, and he's the one that kind of pushed me to go ahead and do it, and to do it on some large. We got plots, but we've also got one field that's a full width field that we're planting into. So here's kind of the idea behind this. We planted wheat at 45 pounds to the acre, which is, as you know, half the recommended rate, and then filled that back in with Balancia clover. And so what we're doing is we're growing a companion crop or intercropping along with the wheat crop. That Balancia clover is an excellent companion crop. It's really good about sharing its nitrogen. So typically a legume, we dig the legume up and we see the nodules and everybody gets excited because you got nodules on your legumes. Well, actually the top part of the plant, the nodules are great. That's the factory. But the top part of the plant's the warehouse. That's where it's storing all that excess nitrogen. But Balancia clover is really good about sharing that nitrogen. So if it's got a grass plant close to it, it'll actually release some of that nitrogen over to that grass plant. That's the reason we chose to incorporate Balancia clover in with this wheat and clover mix. Balancia clover can produce up to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. and it's easy to terminate. Should be able to kill it no problem with 2,4-D. And then we mixed it with our wheat seed at a 1-to-1 rate. So we've got 500,000 plants of wheat per acre, and we've also got 500,000 Valencia clover plants per acre. And the wheat, just so you know, I'm not endorsing anything, but we planted this in progeny bullet wheat is what we used. We wanted it to be something that was tall, and the reason being is hopefully to make harvest a little easier. So this is actually a picture that I got from one of our producers who planted wheat for the first time to plant into cover crop, which kind of stirred the thought is, what if we planted soybeans earlier? What if instead of waiting to harvest that wheat before we planted soybeans, what if we went ahead and planted those soybeans directly into that wheat? Could we harvest them? Could we offset that lower yield from double crop soybeans? I think I've read 20-25% yield loss because of either poor stands or late planting dates or both. So if we could overcome that and still grow a full season wheat crop and a full season bean crop, the wheat does just like it would do for a cover. It's going to still help us control weeds. It's still going to help us help our irrigation. It's going to give us control soil temperatures. We're going to get all the benefits of a cover crop out of a wheat. But some of you, and I've heard this story time and time again, is that we just can't afford to spend money on a cover crop because we don't get any return on that investment. What if we could get a return? What if we could harvest a wheat crop? Even if it's a reduced yield, maybe you don't make 80-90 bushel wheat. Maybe you make 50-60 bushel wheat. But by lowering your inputs, the same way that Adam's talking about doing in rice and that Adam's done in cotton, what if we lower those inputs to a point to where 40 bushel wheat now is profitable? The only thing that we've put out on this wheat is wheat and the clover and some AMS. Yeah, I'm set up to come back in the spring and do some tissue testing and see what we need and apply some more in the spring if we need it. But what if we don't? What if we get enough clover? We get enough free nitrogen from that clover. So relay cropping is not anything new. Lucas Criswell's doing it. Lauren Steinlogge's doing it. Jason Mock's doing it. John Coots started it. It's been done in the Dakotas where they don't have the growing degree days to plant double crop soybeans behind wheat. It's been done everywhere else, but nobody's doing it here. So that's kind of the reason that Adam pushed me and Dr. Green pushed me a little bit. We come up with this idea. We wanted to see what it would do, what we were capable of doing with it. And I mean, basically, we just got to try it. Somebody's got to try. If we're going to learn anything new, somebody's got to try something at some point. And Adam picked me. So we actually planted 2 fields. I planted a 40-acre field to a solid stand of wheat, and going to plant beans into it sometime mid-April, kind of what I'm thinking, maybe mid-April, 1st of May, something like that. And then we have 3 replications of randomized plots with wheat and soybeans on the soybeans will be planted on 30-inch rows, planted in the wheat. We've got a cover crop in these plots as well, and we'll terminate the cover crop at planting, green, just like we typically do. Plant right into that and plant on 30-inch soybeans. So we'll have a 30-inch full season bean planted into a cover crop. We'll have a 30-inch full season bean planted into a growing wheat crop that we'll go in and harvest. And I know what you're all thinking, how you can't harvest wheat with soybeans because you're going to cut the top out of the soybeans. Well, thanks to Lauren Steinlogge, I've already come up with a solution for that. We're going to use a piece of 6-inch PVC and clip it over the cutter bar on the header, and then our combine set up with duals, and the combine will actually track where the wheat is, and the tires will run where there's not any soybeans. It'll run between the soybean rows, and the plastic will push the beans down and allow us to cut the wheat off. And then Adam, he pushed me again, and he's a big guy, so when he pushes you, you move. He said, Keith, why don't you plant some on 60-inch soybeans and see what happens? See if that soybean plant can make up for the yield the way a cotton plant did. So we're going to actually have two 60-inch plots as well. We'll have a 60-inch soybean planted into a green cover crop, and then we'll have a 60-inch soybean planted into a standing wheat crop. And what we're looking at is we're looking at the difference in yield. We're looking at the difference in inputs. And I will go ahead and tell you that I'm skeptical of the 60-inch soybean. So the 40-acre field, the full field that we're doing, it will be on 30s. All of this land's furrow irrigated, so we will be irrigating these soybeans, and hopefully it stays. We keep enough moisture that we don't have to go back and irrigate too early and cause any trouble with getting the wheat out. And hopefully it's dry enough that we can get the wheat out without rutting up the beds. But these are on 60-inch beds. It's what it's on currently, and we'll be harvesting these in I guess in June, whenever it's when we're expecting the wheat come off. And that's kind of a update on some new things we're trying. I know this was about rice and cover crops, and I think that Adam's done a real good job covering rice already. So this is just something new that we're throwing in that I thought you might be interested in. If you got any questions, I'm sure we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this, or my contact information is available. Thank you.